people always talk about Romeo and Juliet as being about love, but actually it's really about the rebellion of the heart, isn't it? It's about much more than just love.
Yeah, it's the most famous love story in history in some basic way. But one of the interesting facts about Romeo and Juliet is that it's almost never played as Shakespeare wrote it, and this seems to have been true almost from the very beginning. It generated parody straight away, and there are various texts. There are two different texts from Shakespeare's period which show the play very quickly being cut, and for example, Juliet's. A lot of Juliet's speeches getting cut in the second half, and she's full of kind of sexual energy and these wild punning and a sort of fearless rebelliousness, and that gets cut in in 1597 and already. And throughout history, what's happened is that the play is edited, cut to suit people's preconceptions about it, to make it more romantic, to make it more of a story about love. And this is still going on today. And so the famous and justly popular films of Romeo and Juliet, the Zeffirelli one from the 60s and then the Baz Luhrmann one from more recently, they basically did the same cuts as were happening in the 18th century, when people were shocked by the violence of the play and by its indecorum. And by indecorum I mean something which is far in excess of expectation, far more than the occasion would seem to ask for. And so, for example, you've got I've mentioned, Juliet's sexual punning, but also there's a scene when Romeo going to the tomb later on, where Juliet's buried herself. There's a scene in which we see Paris, who's the other suitor for Juliet, thinking that Juliet's dead. He walks up there and gives flowers and speaks this rather beautiful speech of praise and mourning for Juliet. And then it's in a very lyrical mode. And then the next moment, Romeo comes up like this savage monster, speaking a completely different kind of language, and brains Paris, basically kills him with a spade. And he's an absolute sort of act of brutality and savagery. There's no sense in which Paris is mocked by Shakespeare at all. But that scene is pretty much always cut. You don't get that scene because it ruins the image of Romeo as the beautiful lover and turns him into a kind of monster. He talks about the great maw of death and so forth in entering that. In the same way, Juliet is a figure who, I at the beginning of the book I talk about a particular moment when Juliet goes to her parents. They're talking about the marriage to Paris, which they've arranged for whenever it is, and she goes to her parents and says, "Yes, I'll see you in the morning. I'll see you in the morning. Good night, good night." And they sort of bless her.
Chilling, isn't it?
Yeah, and she knows full well that she will never see them again, and. We talk about the idea of Juliet as some sort of model for adolescent high-spiritedness or acting upon your desires or something, but this goes far, far beyond anything that we can actually countenance.
Yes, Kapilia Khan says, I think she says something like it's about a pair of adolescents trying to grow up and escape their parents.
Yeah, that seems to me to be far too bourgeois for this play and kind of patronising, really. Nothing against Kapilia Khan's does some great work, but that particular judgment, I think that it suggests that there's a point, that there's an ideal, there's a sort of moderate or livable ideal to which Romeo and Juliet are aiming, something like a happy marriage or a marriage free from the constraints of elders or free from parental coercion, that idea. But that's true in some sense. It's true that they want to be free from that kind of coercion. They want to be free to choose whoever they want to love and that sort of stuff. But what I always think about Shakespeare is the most important stuff, the stuff which is where the real energy is, the stuff which seems either unnecessary or superfluous or somehow kind of beyond what you might think is reasonable, and that's where it's really the action. So what I look at with Juliet is just the absolute excess of what she does. Not only having a sort of hissy fit and abusing her parents, but committing to this plot and then having the coldness of heart and of mind to go to them and execute that plot. I mean, the idea that any sort of, I was going to say 17-year-old, but 13-year-old, saying that to their parents now, and not just saying I'm going to run away now, but actually committing to it. It's far more than a commitment to love. It's a commitment to a kind of excessive will. It's a desire which will annihilate community, which will be an end to family as it's been known, which destroys all relations with everyone she's ever known, apart from this one boy. It's extraordinary.
I mean, you described love as like a sort of mythic force in this play, isn't it? And in a way, with Shakespeare, it's not controlled. It's not something you choose, is it? Certainly in Romeo and Juliet, this idea that his first Romeo's first choice, Rosalind, that was a choice, but with Juliet, it wasn't a choice. It was something which just had to happen. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Shakespeare in most of his plays never sees love as a choice, as something which we can decide upon. Yeah, you get taken by it.
It possesses you.
Yeah, exactly, and it's got a kind of demonic, diabolical force very often, not always, but very often, certainly in this play. I think that, but there's also ways in which it's not only that. I mean, I think Shakespeare's keyed into the notion of passion. He understands. This is, I mean, another way of saying this is a play about rebellion, but it's not. It's also a play about passion, and passion means suffering. That's what it means. It means to submit to things which are beyond your control. It's the opposite of action. Action means you will it, you decide something and you act upon it. Passion means things come at you and you suffer them. And the sort of the glory and the danger of Romeo and Juliet is that these characters, it's absolutely a suffering. There's no sense in which these characters think ahead to some kind of happy domestic survival. That's not what the play's about. The play's about committing to that moment, and it's also keyed into the deep, the darkness of erotic desire is also everywhere in this play, and
of course, but signalled early on by Mercutio. This other, I mean, if you talk about the excess, I mean, there's Mercutio fantastically eloquent with the conjuring up this vision of Queen Mab, this fairy tale queen. But I think you say in the guide that he had to die, and he makes way for Juliet because he's almost like a rival of Juliet. So all that passion, negative passion,
negative passion, and passion that can find no object. With Mercutio, where he has this extraordinary verbal quickness and wit and facility, and nobody can understand what he says fundamentally. Romeo in one brief scene is able to trade jokes with him, but basically he's left behind. But also with Mercutio has this amazing velocity, amazing fertility of imagination, but with nothing to, as it were, appease it, nothing to take it. There's nothing there to take that and to bring it home anywhere. So you get this creativity and fertility without an object. You get creativity and fertility which is also tied to some awful sense of people are always speculating about Mercutio, and they try, in a performance they try to make some sense of his violence and the fact that so many of his jokes are full of sexual disgust. And so, is he in love with Romeo? Is his homoerotic humour? Well, maybe, but it's all there's a kind of sexual loathing and disgust and so forth. And the famous Queen Mab speech is partly about that, and it's about these imagining this spirit of that enters people's dreams and leads to forms of violent pregnancy and so forth. And what I suggest is that this speech is all of the energy of that speech, the violence of that speech, but also I mean, it's a very popular speech, isn't it? It's one of the things which is never cut from the play. No one knows what it means, particularly, but they can feel the sort of self-delighting abundance of the speech, the sense that there's a huge life force.
The Queen
there.
Mab speech.
Yes, the Queen Mab speech.
The fairy tale.
Exactly, the
fairy queen.
Yes, the fairy queen. There's this enormous fertility which has no end point, has no object, and I think basically Juliet, it's kind of I see it as sort of giving birth to
because it ends on a very cynical note. And so in a way. Yeah. I suppose he's the opposite of Juliet. Is that the vision that he conjures up as the opposite in a sense?
I think he's the opposite in that there's no future for Mercutio, but also and Juliet is all about futures, you might say. But equally, he has to die, but so too does Juliet have to die. There's no possibility that Juliet's going to escape death ever, and that she commit, as I said already, her commitment to desire is absolutely a commitment to desire beyond all possibility of living. You know, the first thing that's said of her is, "My child is yet." Her father says, "My child is yet a stranger to the earth." You know, and he talks about how all his other children are in the earth, and she's my only child of the earth, and so she's somehow arriving out of the grave. You know, and she's going to return to that, and she you know she heads into the tomb and so to the extent that Mercutio's sort of vision is one of terrible forms of kind of this. He reduces the world to these atomies, and the whole thing is an explosion which doesn't seem to have any object other than unrequitable desire or something like that. Juliet repairs that. Juliet has the I mean, Mercutio never knows that Juliet exists. It's quite important.
Of course, he doesn't.
I mean, she's a figure of promise. I mean, you get the play sets it up. I mean, it's a very interesting beginning to the play where everything is sort of disappointing and inadequate in this world. Everything, until and even the lovers, even the lovers are disappointed when we first meet them. Romeo's not at the brawl at the start with all those stupid idiots fighting, and then he's alone in a forest. We don't see him, and then Juliet is invoked first by her father, and we don't see her. Then when we first meet her, she's surrounded, crowded out by the nurse and her mother, kind of refusing to let her speak. And so we know that Romeo and Juliet are going to be the heart of the play, and yet we don't actually get to really hear them. Romeo talks sort of cliches to his mate Benvolio. They don't really, as it were, arrive. They don't really come true until that moment when they see each other, and then instantly they come to full life. And that's so there's some sense in which this is magical and predestined, but it's predestined also by our desires. That's what we've been waiting for. And so there's a so to the extent there's hope, it's our hope as much as their hope. I mean, it's not that we don't see Juliet sitting around. Shakespeare doesn't give her soliloquies or something where she says, "Oh God, I'm bored," or "I really wish my true love would turn up." There's nothing like that at all. It happens with extraordinary suddenness.